I'm Miranda Walsh, 27 years old, and I thought I understood how entitled my family could be. That Tuesday morning phone call shattered every assumption I'd had about boundaries and financial manipulation. My wedding planner, Jennifer, nervously informed me that my parents had secretly transformed my intimate 50-guest wedding into an elaborate dual celebration combining my ceremony with my sister Vanessa's 15th anniversary renewal. A $63,000 extravaganza that I was somehow expected to fund entirely alone. What I did next would teach them that my bank account wasn't their event planning emergency fund. Have you ever discovered that your family hijacked your special day and stuck you with a massive bill you never agreed to pay? Drop your predictions about how I handled this wedding financial fraud in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because this family money manipulation story has consequences that will leave you cheering for justice. The financial manipulation didn't start with my wedding. It had been the foundation of our family dynamics since Vanessa married her college sweetheart at 22, while I focused on building my career in digital marketing. My parents had always treated Vanessa's milestones as family celebrations requiring everyone's financial and emotional investment, while my achievements were practical necessities that didn't need recognition or support. Vanessa's original wedding 15 years earlier had consumed my college fund, with my parents explaining that family celebrations were more important than individual education expenses. I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for my business degree, while Vanessa enjoyed her lavish ceremony funded by money that was supposed to secure my future. The pattern had continued throughout Vanessa's marriage, with every anniversary, birthday, and family milestone becoming an opportunity for elaborate celebrations that somehow required my financial contribution despite being presented as gifts from our loving parents to their devoted daughter and son-in-law. My digital marketing agency had grown from a one-person freelance operation to a team of 12 employees generating 7-figure annual revenue, but my professional success was consistently overshadowed by Vanessa's domestic achievements and her family's constant need for financial assistance disguised as temporary loans. "Miranda, you're so good with money and business planning," Mom would say whenever Vanessa's family faced financial difficulties. "Could you help them with the mortgage payment this month? It's just temporary until David gets his promotion." The temporary assistance had become permanent subsidies, with my earnings regularly redirected to maintain Vanessa's lifestyle, while my own financial goals were delayed by family obligations that were never acknowledged or appreciated. When I got engaged to Ryan 6 months earlier, my parents' immediate response was excitement about how my wedding could coordinate with Vanessa's upcoming 15th anniversary celebration. What I'd initially interpreted as family enthusiasm was actually strategic planning for combining celebrations in ways that would maximize impact while minimizing their financial contribution. "Miranda, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could celebrate both milestones together?" Dad had suggested during our first wedding planning conversation. "Vanessa and David have been talking about renewing their vows, and combining the celebrations would make both events more special." My initial response had been firm refusal, preferring to keep my wedding intimate and separate from Vanessa's anniversary needs. Ryan and I had envisioned a simple ceremony for close friends and family, followed by an elegant dinner reception that celebrated our partnership without elaborate production or extended family drama. But my parents' pressure campaign was relentless, using guilt about family unity and financial responsibility to wear down my resistance while simultaneously beginning secret planning for the combined celebration I'd explicitly refused to authorize. "Miranda, you know Vanessa and David can't afford the kind of anniversary celebration they deserve after 15 years of marriage," Mom explained during one of many conversations about family financial planning. "Your wedding is already going to be beautiful and expensive, so sharing some of that celebration with your sister would be a generous gift that shows how much you love her." The suggestion that my wedding budget should subsidize Vanessa's anniversary was presented as sisterly generosity rather than financial manipulation, but I was beginning to recognize the pattern of my success being treated as family resources available for redistribution. What I didn't realize was that my parents had been actively planning the combined celebration without my consent, using financial information and credit access they'd retained from years of family financial involvement to create obligations and contracts that would force my participation. The first sign of their deception came during a conversation with my cousin Lisa, who mentioned seeing elaborate anniversary planning posts on Vanessa's social media about the dual milestone celebration that was being organized for our family's summer events. When I asked Vanessa about the anniversary planning, her response revealed that she'd been actively involved in creating what she considered our joint celebration, making decisions about venues, catering, and entertainment that had nothing to do with the wedding Ryan and I had actually requested. "Miranda, this is going to be amazing for both of us," Vanessa said enthusiastically. "We are planning something that will be unforgettable for everyone, a real celebration that honors both our relationships and shows how strong our family bonds are." But Vanessa's vision of an unforgettable celebration bore no resemblance to the intimate wedding I'd wanted, and her assumption that I'd enthusiastically fund her anniversary dreams was revealing about how our family had always treated my financial resources as community property. The wedding planning process had become increasingly uncomfortable as vendors began referring to our combined celebration and asking about coordination between the two brides who were sharing the event. I'd assumed these were miscommunications that would be clarified during planning meetings, not evidence of systematic deception by my own family. My parents' casual references to cost sharing and event coordination had seemed like general financial planning rather than specific arrangements they'd made without my knowledge or consent. I'd trusted them to respect my boundaries while helping with wedding logistics, but I was beginning to understand that trust had been a mistake. The phone call from Jennifer that revealed the full scope of their financial manipulation was devastating not just because of the money, but because it exposed years of boundary violations and financial deception that had been hidden behind family love and celebration rhetoric. As I processed the magnitude of what my family had done, secretly planning an elaborate celebration using my credit and expecting me to fund Vanessa's anniversary dreams, I realized that this wasn't just wedding planning gone wrong, but systematic financial fraud that required legal intervention rather than family negotiation. The phone call from Jennifer started routinely, with final confirmations for what I'd believed was my intimate wedding celebration. Instead, it became the moment I discovered that my parents had committed financial fraud by using my name and credit to create obligations for an elaborate event I'd never authorized or agreed to fund. "Miranda, I'm calling to confirm the final details for your combined wedding and anniversary celebration," Jennifer said, her voice reflecting professional enthusiasm for what she clearly believed was an exciting family milestone event. The words "combined celebration" hit me like a physical blow, as I realized that the wedding I'd planned had been secretly transformed into something entirely different without my knowledge or consent. "Jennifer, what do you mean by combined celebration?" I asked, needing clarification about arrangements I'd never approved or discussed with my wedding planner. Her uncomfortable pause suggested she was beginning to realize that she'd walked into a family conflict she hadn't anticipated or prepared for during our planning process. "Miranda, your parents have been working with me for the past 6 weeks to coordinate your wedding with Vanessa's anniversary celebration," Jennifer explained carefully. "The event has expanded to accommodate 200 guests, with ceremony and reception at the grand ballroom, full catering service, live entertainment, and luxury amenities for both celebrations." Each detail she described was more expensive and elaborate than anything I'd requested or budgeted for my wedding, creating a picture of an event that served Vanessa's anniversary vision rather than my actual preferences. "The total cost for the combined celebration is $63,000, Jennifer continued, "and according to our payment arrangements, you're listed as the primary responsible party for all expenses." $63,000. My parents had committed me to pay for an elaborate celebration I'd never wanted, using financial arrangements I'd never agreed to, for an event that prioritized Vanessa's anniversary dreams while hijacking my wedding completely. "Jennifer, I never authorized a combined celebration. or agreed to pay $63,000 for any event, I said firmly, my voice gaining strength as anger replaced shock. My wedding budget is $18,000 for an intimate celebration, not an elaborate anniversary party for my sister. The silence that followed revealed that Jennifer was beginning to understand she'd become involved in family financial manipulation that went far beyond normal wedding planning complications. Miranda, I have contracts signed with your name and payment authorizations using your credit cards, Jennifer said uncomfortably. Your mother provided all the financial information and assured me that you'd approved the expanded celebration. The revelation that my mother had forged my signature and used my credit information without permission transformed my understanding of this situation from family boundary issues to criminal financial fraud. Jennifer, my mother doesn't have authorization to use my credit cards or sign contracts in my name, I said, my legal training beginning to process the criminal implications of what had been done. These contracts are fraudulent, and I'll be disputing all charges and arrangements made without my consent. But the financial fraud was just the beginning of what I was about to discover about my family's deception and manipulation regarding my wedding and Vanessa's anniversary celebration. Miranda, there's something else you should know, Jennifer continued reluctantly. Vanessa has been very involved in planning the celebration, and she's made it clear that the anniversary renewal is the primary focus of the event, with your wedding ceremony incorporated as part of their milestone celebration. The revelation that my wedding had been relegated to a secondary component of Vanessa's anniversary party was devastating and revealing about how my family had always prioritized her needs and celebrations over my achievements and milestones. My immediate call to confront my parents about the financial fraud was met with defensive justification rather than acknowledgement of wrongdoing or apology for violating my financial boundaries. Miranda, we were trying to give both you and Vanessa something beautiful that you'll remember forever, Dad said when I presented evidence of the forged contracts and unauthorized credit use. Combining the celebrations makes financial sense and shows how strong our family bonds are. The suggestion that financial fraud was motivated by family love was insulting and revealed how completely they misunderstood both legal boundaries and my actual preferences for my wedding celebration. Mom's response was even more manipulative, focusing on Vanessa's feelings and anniversary needs rather than the criminal nature of using my financial information without permission. Miranda, Vanessa has been so excited about celebrating her anniversary alongside your wedding, Mom said, tears flowing as she deployed emotional manipulation to avoid accountability. You're going to break her heart and ruin her special celebration if you cancel all the arrangements we've made. The characterization of my response to financial fraud as family destruction was particularly manipulative, since they were the ones who'd committed crimes against their own daughter while prioritizing Vanessa's anniversary dreams over my consent and financial security. Vanessa's reaction when she learned about my dispute of the fraudulent contracts was immediate fury rather than understanding about the financial crimes that had been committed in my name. Miranda, you can't cancel everything now, Vanessa screamed during our family confrontation about the situation. I've been planning this anniversary celebration for months, and everyone knows about our combined ceremony. You'll humiliate me if you destroy all the arrangements. The entitlement was breathtaking. Vanessa was more concerned about her social embarrassment than the fact that her anniversary celebration was being funded through financial fraud committed against her own sister. Vanessa, these contracts were signed using forged signatures and stolen credit information, I said, trying to help her understand that this wasn't a family disagreement, but a criminal matter. You're asking me to honor financial crimes that could destroy my credit and create legal liability for unauthorized debt. But Vanessa's response revealed how completely she'd internalized the family dynamic where my financial resources existed to serve her needs and celebrations regardless of my consent or preferences. Miranda, you make good money with your business, and you can afford this celebration, Vanessa said, as if my income created an obligation to fund her anniversary party through fraudulent means. Why are you being so selfish about giving your sister something special for her milestone? The casual dismissal of financial fraud as sisterly selfishness was the moment I realized that my family's dysfunction extended beyond poor boundaries into criminal behavior that required legal intervention rather than family negotiation. As I documented the extent of their financial deception and prepared to involve law enforcement in protecting myself from family members who saw my bank account as their event planning resource, I understood that this confrontation would permanently alter our relationships in ways they hadn't considered when they decided to steal my wedding day and stick me with the bill. The morning after discovering the full scope of my parents' financial fraud, I was sitting in my attorney's office with documented evidence of identity theft, credit card fraud, and contract forgery that would form the basis of both criminal charges and civil litigation against my own family members. "Miranda, what your parents did constitutes multiple felonies," my attorney explained as we reviewed the forged contracts and unauthorized credit charges. "Identity theft, financial fraud, and elder abuse if we consider their systematic exploitation of your financial resources over the years." The legal classification of my family's behavior as criminal was both validating and devastating, confirming that their treatment of my financial accounts as community property had crossed from dysfunction into federal crime. My first step was comprehensive damage control, disputing every fraudulent charge and contract while documenting the systematic pattern of financial manipulation that had characterized my relationship with my family for years. The credit card company's fraud investigations revealed that my parents had been using my financial information for unauthorized purchases beyond the wedding fraud, including vacation bookings, home improvements, and luxury items that had been charged to my accounts without my knowledge or consent. "Ms. Walsh, our investigation shows a pattern of unauthorized account access spanning 18 months, the fraud investigator explained. "The charges total over $47,000 beyond the wedding-related fraud, suggesting systematic identity theft rather than isolated incidents." The revelation that my family had been stealing from me for over a year, while I'd been trusting them with wedding planning responsibilities, was devastating and explained how they'd become so comfortable committing large-scale financial fraud for Vanessa's anniversary celebration. My parents' reaction, when they learned about the criminal investigation, was immediate panic rather than acknowledgement of wrongdoing or offers to make restitution for the money they'd stolen. "Miranda, you can't involve law enforcement in family financial matters," Dad said when he received notification from investigators about the fraud case. "We're your parents, not criminals. You became criminals when you forged my signature and stole my credit information to fund Vanessa's party," I replied firmly. "Family relationships don't create exemptions from fraud laws." Mom's approach was more manipulative, focusing on family loyalty and Vanessa's emotional devastation rather than the criminal nature of their financial deception. "Miranda, you're destroying our family over money," Mom sobbed during her emotional phone call. "Vanessa is heartbroken about her anniversary celebration being cancelled, and you're putting your own parents at risk of criminal charges." The suggestion that I was destroying the family over money was particularly manipulative, since they were the ones who'd committed financial crimes against their own daughter to fund Vanessa's anniversary dreams without considering the legal consequences of their fraud. Vanessa's response to the criminal investigation was characteristic self-centeredness, focusing entirely on how the fraud charges would affect her social standing rather than acknowledging that her anniversary celebration had been funded through crimes against her sister. "Miranda, everyone knows about our anniversary celebration, and now you're humiliating me by calling our parents criminals and canceling everything," Vanessa said during what would be our final conversation for months. The focus on her embarrassment rather than my financial victimization was typical of Vanessa's lifelong pattern of treating my resources and sacrifices as background support for her emotional needs and social celebrations. But my nuclear response extended beyond criminal charges to comprehensive financial protection and systematic documentation of their fraud for use in both civil litigation and future boundary enforcement. The forensic accountant I'd hired to review my financial records uncovered additional evidence of systematic exploitation, including redirected tax refunds, unauthorized investment account access, and forged checks that had been used to fund Vanessa's lifestyle over the past 2 years. Miranda, the evidence shows that your family has been treating your financial accounts as their personal funding source, the accountant reported. The total theft exceeds $78,000 when we include all unauthorized transactions and fraudulent charges. The comprehensive scope of their financial crimes was staggering and revealed that the wedding fraud was just the most recent example of years of systematic theft that had been hidden behind family financial planning rhetoric. My decision to pursue maximum criminal penalties rather than accepting restitution agreements was based on the recognition that my family would continue committing financial crimes against me unless they faced legal consequences that made such behavior impossible. The district attorney's office was particularly interested in the case because family financial fraud was becoming increasingly common, and prosecutors wanted to send a clear message about criminal penalties for relatives who exploited family relationships for financial gain. Ms. Walsh, your family's systematic fraud against you over multiple years makes this an ideal case for demonstrating that blood relationships don't create immunity from financial crime prosecution, the prosecutor explained. Federal investigators became involved when the scope of the fraud crossed state lines, with vacation bookings and vendor payments creating interstate commerce implications that elevated the charges to federal jurisdiction with much more serious penalty ranges. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit assigned to investigate my case discovered that my parents had been using my financial information to create multiple fraudulent accounts and credit applications, turning my identity into a comprehensive funding source for their lifestyle and Vanessa's celebrations. Miranda, your parents created an entire financial ecosystem based on your stolen identity, the federal agent explained. This goes far beyond wedding planning fraud into organized identity theft and systematic financial exploitation. The federal investigation would result in charges that could send my parents to prison for decades while requiring complete financial restitution and permanent restrictions on their access to credit or financial accounts. But the most satisfying aspect of my nuclear response was the complete protection it provided from future family financial manipulation, with legal barriers that made it impossible for them to access my money or credit regardless of family emergencies or celebration needs. Within 60 days of initiating the criminal investigation, I had comprehensive legal protection from family financial fraud, documented evidence of their systematic theft, and federal prosecutors preparing criminal cases that would ensure they faced meaningful consequences for treating my bank account as their party planning fund. The wedding celebration they'd tried to steal and stick me with paying for had become the evidence that would send them to prison for financial crimes against their own daughter. 3 months after initiating the federal fraud investigation, the consequences of my parents' financial crimes were cascading through every aspect of their lives and social relationships. What had started as wedding planning manipulation had evolved into a comprehensive criminal case that was generating community scandal and professional consequences that extended far beyond their immediate legal problems. The federal indictment included 47 separate counts of identity theft, credit card fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges that could result in combined prison sentences of over 60 years if they were convicted on all counts. The systematic nature of their financial crimes over multiple years had created a compelling case that prosecutors described as one of the most comprehensive family fraud schemes they'd encountered. My parents' desperate attempts to negotiate plea agreements revealed the full scope of potential penalties they were facing for treating my financial accounts as their personal funding source for lifestyle expenses and Vanessa's celebrations. Miranda, your parents are looking at decades in federal prison if this case goes to trial, their attorney informed me during plea negotiation discussions. They are prepared to accept responsibility and pay full restitution in exchange for reduced charges and supervised probation. The restitution requirements would bankrupt my parents completely, forcing them to liquidate their house, retirement accounts, and all assets to compensate me for the $78,000 they'd stolen through identity theft, plus legal costs, penalties, and interest that would bring the total to over $120,000. But financial restitution was just the beginning of the consequences they'd face for their systematic fraud against their own daughter. The federal conviction would result in permanent restrictions on their access to credit, banking services, and financial accounts, effectively ending their ability to manage their own finances without court supervision and approval. The social consequences were equally devastating, as news of the federal fraud case spread through their professional and personal networks. Dad's position as a senior accountant became impossible to maintain when his employer learned about criminal charges for systematic financial fraud and identity theft. "Mr. Walsh, we can't have someone facing federal fraud charges handling client financial information and tax preparations," his employer explained when terminating his employment after 30 years with the firm. Mom's real estate career was similarly destroyed when clients learned about her criminal prosecution for financial fraud and identity theft, raising obvious questions about trustworthiness with financial documents and property transactions. The community gossip was swift and brutal, with neighbors and friends distancing themselves from people facing federal criminal charges for stealing from their own daughter to fund elaborate celebrations and lifestyle expenses. Vanessa's marriage was experiencing severe strain as her husband David began to understand that their comfortable lifestyle throughout their marriage had been subsidized through criminal fraud against his sister-in-law rather than his in-laws' legitimate generosity. "Miranda, I had no idea that your parents were stealing from you to help with our expenses," David told me during one of our difficult conversations about the family crisis. "I thought they were just generous people who wanted to help their daughter and son-in-law maintain a nice lifestyle." But David also revealed that Vanessa's reaction to learning about the criminal prosecution was anger at me for exposing the fraud rather than remorse about benefiting from stolen money for years. "Vanessa is furious with you for pressing criminal charges against your parents," David admitted. "She keeps saying you're destroying the family over money, and that you should have just paid for the anniversary celebration without making it a legal issue." The revelation that Vanessa believed I should have accepted financial fraud rather than seeking legal protection was final confirmation that our relationship was beyond repair, and that she'd never understood the difference between family support and criminal exploitation. The wedding vendors who'd been involved in the fraudulent contracts were facing their own legal and financial complications as federal investigators examined their role in processing forged signatures and unauthorized credit card charges. Jennifer, my former wedding planner, was cooperating with investigators while dealing with professional crisis about her liability in the fraud scheme. "Miranda, I never imagined that your parents were committing identity theft when they provided financial information for the expanded celebration," Jennifer explained during her interview with federal agents. "I've completely revised our authorization procedures to prevent this kind of fraud in the future." The vendor community had implemented new verification protocols for financial authority and signature authentication after learning about the systematic fraud that had been committed using my stolen identity and forged documents. Extended family members were experiencing social consequences as relatives and friends learned about the federal criminal case and the systematic financial abuse that had characterized my parents' treatment of their successful daughter for years. Cousin Rachel called me with genuine horror and apology after learning the full scope of the financial crimes from federal investigators, who were interviewing family members as potential witnesses. "Miranda, I had no idea that your parents were stealing from you to fund all those elaborate celebrations and lifestyle expenses," Rachel said, her voice reflecting shame about unknowingly celebrating criminal behavior. "We all thought they were just generous people who wanted to help Vanessa's family. But some extended family members remained loyal to my parents and continued to view me as the villain who'd destroyed family unity by refusing to accept financial fraud as normal family financial planning." Uncle Tom openly criticized my decision to pursue criminal charges, arguing that family financial matters should be resolved through family conversations rather than federal prosecutors. Miranda made this into a criminal issue when it should have stayed a family financial disagreement, Uncle Tom told relatives who would listen. Parents helping their children isn't a crime, even if they made mistakes about permission and communication. The family division was permanent and bitter, with relatives forced to choose between supporting a financial fraud victim or enabling criminal behavior disguised as family generosity. My digital marketing business was experiencing unexpected growth as potential clients sought services from someone who'd demonstrated the courage to prosecute family members for financial crimes rather than accepting exploitation as the price of maintaining relationships. Ms. Walsh, we heard about your situation with family financial fraud, and we want to work with someone who has the integrity to protect herself from people trying to exploit her success, a potential client explained during our consultation meeting. The professional respect I was gaining from my legal response to family financial crimes was gratifying and revealed that business leaders valued integrity and boundary setting even when it came at personal cost. But the most significant consequence was psychological freedom from family guilt and manipulation that had controlled my financial decisions for years. Without the constant drain of family financial obligations disguised as love and celebration, I was accumulating wealth and building security at a pace I'd never experienced. The credit protection services had secured my financial accounts with enhanced authentication that made family fraud impossible, while the federal prosecution ensured that my parents would face meaningful consequences for their systematic theft and identity exploitation. As the criminal case moved toward resolution with guilty pleas and restitution requirements that would bankrupt my parents completely, I was building a new life based on financial boundaries and authentic relationships with people who celebrated my success rather than exploiting it. 6 months after initiating the federal fraud prosecution, the consequences were continuing to spread through every aspect of my family's relationships and community standing while simultaneously liberating me from financial manipulation that had characterized our dynamics for years. The systematic nature of my parents' crimes was becoming public knowledge that would follow them permanently. The plea agreements that my parents eventually accepted included guilty pleas to 23 felony counts, supervised probation for 5 years, and complete financial restitution of $127,847, the full amount they'd stolen plus legal costs, penalties, and interest. The restitution payments would require them to liquidate all assets and surrender their home, retirement accounts, and personal property. But more importantly, the plea agreements included permanent legal restrictions on their access to my financial information and court-ordered prohibitions on using my name, credit, or financial accounts for any purpose without explicit written authorization witnessed by attorneys. The legal protections were comprehensive and enforceable, creating a framework that made family financial manipulation impossible while allowing for potential relationship rebuilding based on respect rather than exploitation. My parents' financial ruin was complete and public, with the house they'd owned for 25 years being sold to pay restitution while they moved into a small rental apartment and took minimum wage jobs to make court-ordered monthly payments toward their debt to me. The social consequences were equally severe, with former friends and professional colleagues distancing themselves from convicted felons who'd systematically defrauded their own daughter to fund lifestyle expenses and elaborate celebrations. Dad's accounting career was permanently over, with professional licensing boards revoking his certifications based on criminal convictions for financial fraud. The expertise he'd built over 30 years was worthless when combined with a federal criminal record for systematic theft and identity crimes. Mom's real estate license was similarly revoked, ending her career and professional identity while making it impossible for her to work in any field requiring financial trustworthiness or client confidentiality. But the most devastating consequence for my parents was the complete loss of respect and social standing they'd enjoyed as successful professionals and generous family members. The community now understood that their apparent generosity toward Vanessa had been funded through crimes against their other daughter. Vanessa's adjustment to life, without financial subsidies stolen from my accounts, was traumatic and revealing about how completely her lifestyle had depended on my parents' systematic fraud rather than her family's actual income and resources. David filed for divorce 4 months after my parents' criminal convictions, citing irreconcilable differences about financial ethics and Vanessa's continued expectation that family members should fund her lifestyle choices regardless of legal or moral boundaries. "I can't stay married to someone who thinks her sister should have accepted financial fraud rather than protecting herself from criminal exploitation," David explained during our final conversation about his decision to end their marriage. The divorce settlement revealed that Vanessa had no assets of her own, having spent 15 years of marriage consuming rather than contributing while expecting subsidies stolen from my accounts to make up the difference between her lifestyle expectations and their actual income. Vanessa's forced entry into full-time employment, for the first time in her adult life, was reportedly difficult and humiliating, as she discovered that her part-time retail experience didn't qualify her for the high-paying positions she felt entitled to based on her previous lifestyle expectations. Her attempts at reconciliation with me were sporadic and usually coincided with financial crises that required assistance from family members who were no longer available to fund her lifestyle through criminal fraud. "Miranda, I know our parents made mistakes with the wedding planning, but I'm struggling financially since the divorce," Vanessa said during one of our supervised conversations facilitated by family therapist. "I was hoping we could work out some arrangement where you help me get back on my feet." The expectation that reconciliation should include financial assistance revealed that Vanessa still didn't understand the difference between sisterly love and subsidizing someone else's lifestyle choices through personal sacrifice. My response to Vanessa's reconciliation attempts was consistent and firm. I was open to rebuilding our relationship based on mutual respect and genuine sisterly affection, but not if it included expectations of financial support or lifestyle subsidies disguised as family love. Extended family relationships had undergone dramatic transformation as relatives processed the criminal convictions and evidence of systematic financial manipulation that had characterized my parents' treatment of their successful daughter for years. Grandmother Betty, now 89, had become one of my strongest supporters and regularly expressed pride in my courage to prosecute family members who'd betrayed and exploited me. "Miranda, dear, I'm proud of you for standing up to people who were stealing your money and lying to everyone about their generosity," Grandmother told me during one of our weekly visits. Family loyalty doesn't mean accepting criminal behavior from relatives who think blood relationships excuse theft and fraud. The family support I'd received after the criminal convictions was gratifying, but also highlighted how many relatives had witnessed the financial manipulation over the years without intervening or supporting me when I'd tried to establish boundaries around their entitled behavior. My digital marketing agency had expanded significantly as word spread about my expertise in protecting business assets from family financial manipulation and fraud. The professional success that had grown from personal legal battles was deeply fulfilling and allowed me to help other entrepreneurs recognize and defend against relatives who viewed their achievements as community resources. "Ms. Walsh, we need help protecting our business assets from family members who think our success creates obligations to fund their lifestyle choices and financial emergencies," a typical client explained during consultation. The business growth that resulted from my legal battles with family financial fraud was satisfying and meaningful, allowing me to transform personal victimization into professional expertise that protected other people from similar exploitation. But the most significant change was personal rather than professional. My relationship with Ryan had deepened considerably, as he'd witnessed my courage in choosing legal protection over family approval when those values conflicted fundamentally. "Miranda, watching you prosecute your own parents for financial crimes showed me exactly the kind of integrity and strength I want in a life partner," Ryan told me as we planned our actual wedding celebration. "You chose what was right over what was easy, and that's incredibly attractive." Our wedding, which we'd rescheduled for the following spring, would be the intimate celebration we'd originally envisioned. funded entirely by our own savings and free from family financial manipulation or expectations of reciprocal support for relatives' lifestyle choices. The prenuptial agreement we'd drafted included comprehensive protections against family financial claims, an authorized account access, and identity theft by relatives who might view our combined assets as community resources available for their use. As my parents served their probation and made restitution payments, while Vanessa struggled with employment and financial independence for the first time in her adult life, I was building a future based on financial boundaries and authentic relationships with people who celebrated my success rather than exploiting it. The wedding fraud that had started everything was becoming a cautionary tale about family financial crimes that would protect other people from similar exploitation by relatives who mistake success for obligation. 1 year after my parents' criminal convictions for systematically defrauding me to fund Vanessa's lifestyle and anniversary celebration, the transformation in our family dynamics was complete and permanent. They were living in court-supervised poverty while making monthly restitution payments, while I was thriving in ways that had been impossible when my financial success was treated as community property. The federal probation system's financial monitoring of my parents ensured that every dollar they earned was tracked and allocated according to court orders that prioritized restitution payments to me over their own comfort or lifestyle preferences. Their monthly reports to probation officers included detailed accounting of income, expenses, and progress toward paying the $127,847 they owed me for years of systematic theft. The financial restrictions were comprehensive and humiliating, requiring court approval for any expenditure over $50 while prohibiting them from accessing credit, opening bank accounts, or making financial decisions without probation officer review and approval. Mr. and Mrs. Walsh are making progress on their restitution requirements, their probation officer informed me during quarterly updates, but at their current income levels, it will take approximately 8 years to pay the full amount they owe you. The 8-year timeline meant that my parents would spend most of their remaining working years paying for their crimes against me while living in court-supervised financial restriction that prevented them from rebuilding the comfortable lifestyle they'd maintained through stolen money. But more satisfying than their financial punishment was the complete social and professional destruction that had resulted from their criminal convictions becoming public knowledge throughout their community and professional networks. Dad's attempts to find employment in accounting or financial services were consistently rejected when background checks revealed federal convictions for identity theft and systematic financial fraud. The professional reputation he'd built over 30 years was permanently destroyed by criminal behavior that made him unemployable in any position requiring financial trustworthiness. Mom's situation was equally hopeless, with real estate licensing boards and employers rejecting applications from someone with criminal convictions for financial fraud and identity theft. The social connections and professional relationships she'd cultivated were severed by people who couldn't associate with convicted criminals. Their social isolation was complete, with former friends and neighbors avoiding people whose apparent generosity had been revealed as systematic criminal fraud against their own daughter. The respect they'd enjoyed as successful community members was replaced by judgment and disgust about their exploitation of family relationships for financial gain. Vanessa's life had undergone equally dramatic transformation as she faced financial reality without subsidies stolen from my accounts. The divorce from David had left her with no assets and limited employability, forcing her to accept entry-level retail positions that barely covered basic living expenses. Her attempts to maintain the lifestyle she'd enjoyed throughout her marriage were failing consistently, with credit applications denied and loan requests rejected due to insufficient income and employment history. The comfortable existence she'd taken for granted was revealed as entirely dependent on criminal fraud rather than legitimate financial resources. But the most satisfying aspect of Vanessa's situation was her growing understanding that 15 years of marriage subsidized by stolen money had prevented her from developing any real skills or professional qualifications that could support independent adult life. Miranda, I'm struggling to find work that pays enough to cover rent and basic expenses, Vanessa admitted during one of our rare conversations. I never realized how much our lifestyle depended on Mom and Dad's help, and now I understand that help was actually money they stole from you. The acknowledgement was partial progress toward understanding the criminal nature of our parents' behavior, but it was still combined with subtle requests for assistance and expectations that our reconciliation should include some level of financial support. My response remained consistent. I was willing to rebuild our relationship based on mutual respect and genuine sisterly affection, but not if it included financial assistance or subsidies for lifestyle choices she couldn't afford on her own income. Ryan's and my wedding had taken place 6 months earlier in exactly the intimate setting we'd originally envisioned, with 50 guests who celebrated our partnership without any expectation of funding their own lifestyle choices or anniversary celebrations. The ceremony was beautiful, elegant, and completely funded by our own savings without family financial contributions or expectations of reciprocal support for relative celebration needs. The contrast with the elaborate fraud my parents had attempted to perpetrate was striking: authentic celebration based on our actual preferences, rather than stolen spectacle designed to serve Vanessa's anniversary dreams. The prenuptial agreement we'd signed included ironclad protections against family financial manipulation, with specific clauses preventing relatives from accessing our accounts, using our names for financial transactions, or creating obligations without explicit written consent witnessed by attorneys. Miranda, I want you to know that watching you prosecute your own parents for financial crimes convinced me that you're someone who will always protect our partnership from people who might try to exploit our success, Ryan said during his wedding vows. Your courage in choosing integrity over family approval shows me exactly the kind of character I want to build a life with. Extended family relationships had stabilized around clear acknowledgement that my parents' systematic fraud had been criminal behavior rather than generous family financial planning. Relatives who'd previously pressured me to accommodate Vanessa's needs were now supporting my decision to protect myself through legal prosecution. Uncle James, who'd initially criticized my decision to involve law enforcement in family financial matters, called me with a heartfelt apology after witnessing the ongoing consequences of my parents' criminal behavior. Miranda, I owe you an apology for suggesting you should have handled your parents' theft through family conversations rather than criminal prosecution, he said during our reconciliation call. Watching them continue to manipulate and exploit people even after their convictions has shown me that legal consequences were the only thing that could stop their pattern of financial abuse. The family support was gratifying and revealed that criminal prosecution had been necessary to expose the systematic nature of financial manipulation that many relatives had witnessed but not fully understood until the federal investigation revealed the comprehensive scope of fraud. My digital marketing agency had become the most successful business in our region, with clients specifically seeking services from someone who demonstrated the courage to prosecute family members for financial crimes rather than accepting exploitation as the price of maintaining relationships. Ms. Walsh, we need help from someone who understands that family relationships can be the biggest threat to business financial security, explained one corporate client during our initial consultation. Your experience prosecuting relatives who tried to steal from you gives us confidence that you'll help us protect our assets from people who think success creates obligations to share wealth. The professional reputation I'd gained from legal battles with family financial fraud was generating referrals and opportunities that had expanded my business into financial protection consulting for other entrepreneurs dealing with relatives who viewed their achievements as community resources. But the most meaningful professional development was launching a nonprofit organization that helped victims of family financial fraud navigate legal protections and criminal prosecution of relatives who exploited trust and blood relationships for financial gain. The Family Financial Fraud Prevention Foundation provided legal resources, emotional support, and practical assistance to people dealing with relatives who treated their success as community property available for unauthorized use. Miranda, your foundation helped me understand that my parents' use of my credit cards wasn't family financial planning. It was identity theft that I could prosecute, explained one client whose situation mirrored my own experience with systematic family financial manipulation. The nonprofit work was deeply fulfilling and allowed me to transform personal victimization into resources that protected other people from family members who mistake love for unlimited access to financial accounts and credit information. My parents' attempts at reconciliation had been consistent and pathetic, focusing on minimizing their criminal behavior while requesting reduced restitution payments and early termination of probation supervision that restricted their financial freedom. Miranda, we realize we made mistakes with the wedding planning and financial management, but we've learned from this experience, and we want to rebuild our relationship, Dad wrote in one of many letters requesting forgiveness and reduced legal consequences. The characterization of systematic criminal fraud as mistakes and financial management issues revealed that they still didn't understand the difference between family financial support and identity theft committed against their own daughter. My response to reconciliation attempts was consistent with the boundaries I'd established through legal prosecution. I was open to rebuilding relationships based on respect for legal restrictions and acknowledgement of criminal behavior, but not if they continued minimizing their fraud or requesting reduced consequences for systematic theft. The most satisfying development was completely unexpected: Vanessa's gradual recognition that our parents' treatment of me had been systematically abusive, and that her comfortable lifestyle had been funded through crimes that had damaged her sister's financial security for years. Miranda, I've been thinking about how Mom and Dad always made your achievements about what they could provide for me, and I'm starting to understand that they were stealing your success to fund my lifestyle, Vanessa said during our most honest conversation since childhood. I know I can't undo the damage that was done, or pay back the money they stole from you to give to me, but I want you to know that I finally understand why you had them prosecuted and why you couldn't just pay for my anniversary celebration. The acknowledgement was genuine progress toward understanding the criminal nature of our family dynamics, though it was still combined with financial struggles that made our relationship rebuilding process challenging. As I sat in my home office, reviewing the quarterly report from my parents' probation officer about their restitution payments, I reflected on the year that had transformed my life from family financial exploitation to legal victory and authentic relationships built on mutual respect. The wedding fraud that my parents had attempted had become the catalyst for exposing systematic criminal behavior that would have continued indefinitely if I hadn't chosen legal protection over family loyalty when those values conflicted. 2 years after my parents' criminal convictions for systematically defrauding me to fund their lifestyle and Vanessa's celebrations, I was sitting in my expanded office reviewing the annual report from the Family Financial Fraud Prevention Foundation, which had helped over 200 victims prosecute relatives for financial crimes and recover millions in stolen assets. The foundation's success was deeply personal and professionally meaningful, transforming my experience with family financial manipulation into resources that protected other people from relatives who viewed their achievements as community property available for unauthorized exploitation. Miranda, your foundation helped me understand that family financial abuse is actually criminal behavior that can be prosecuted, explained Sarah, a successful attorney whose parents had been using her identity to fund their retirement lifestyle without her knowledge. The legal resources and emotional support you provided made it possible for me to protect myself from people I'd been trained to trust unconditionally. The nonprofit work was generating national attention from legal professionals and financial institutions interested in protecting clients from family members who used emotional manipulation and trust to commit identity theft and systematic fraud. My parents' restitution payments were continuing on schedule, with quarterly reports showing steady progress toward paying the full amount they owed me for years of systematic theft. The court-supervised financial restrictions had effectively ended their ability to manipulate family members or exploit trust for financial gain. Mr. and Mrs. Walsh have paid $47,000 of their restitution obligation, their probation officer reported during our annual review meeting. They are maintaining employment and making consistent payments, though their living situation remains restricted by court-ordered financial monitoring. The financial restrictions were comprehensive and permanent, requiring court approval for major purchases while prohibiting access to credit or financial accounts that could be used to resume their pattern of fraud and identity theft. But more importantly, the criminal convictions had created legal precedent that other victims of family financial fraud could use to prosecute relatives who treated their success as community resources available for unauthorized use. The Walsh case has become the gold standard for prosecuting systematic family financial fraud, explained the district attorney during a conference presentation about our case. The comprehensive evidence and successful prosecution demonstrated that family relationships don't create immunity from financial crime consequences. My parents' social isolation had become complete and permanent, with former friends and professional colleagues maintaining distance from convicted felons who'd systematically exploited their own daughter's financial success for years. Dad's employment situation had stabilized at a basic level, with janitorial work that provided minimal income while allowing him to make court-ordered restitution payments. The prestigious accounting career he'd built over 3 decades was permanently destroyed by criminal convictions for systematic financial fraud. Mom's situation was similarly constrained, with retail employment that provided basic income while restricting her to work that didn't require financial trustworthiness or professional credibility. Their attempts at community rehabilitation were consistently unsuccessful, with neighbors and acquaintances who knew about their criminal history maintaining social distance from people whose apparent generosity had been revealed as systematic fraud against their own daughter. Vanessa's transformation had been more successful and meaningful than I'd anticipated, with genuine acknowledgement of her role in benefiting from criminal behavior and authentic efforts to build financial independence without family subsidies. Miranda, I've been in therapy for over a year working to understand how I became someone who expected other people to fund my lifestyle without considering the cost to them, Vanessa told me during one of our monthly check-in conversations. I realize now that Mom and Dad weren't being generous when they helped me, they were stealing from you to give to me, and I was so entitled that I never questioned where the money came from or whether you'd agreed to provide it. The therapy had helped Vanessa understand that accepting stolen money wasn't family love, and that building genuine relationships required reciprocity rather than one-sided financial support disguised as family loyalty. Her employment had progressed from retail to office management, with steady income that allowed her to maintain basic financial independence without requiring assistance from family members or stolen resources. I know I can never repay you for the money Mom and Dad stole from you to give to me, Vanessa continued, but I want you to know that I'm working to become someone worthy of your respect and sisterly relationship. The individual progress was encouraging and suggested that our relationship might eventually be rebuilt on foundations of mutual respect rather than financial exploitation disguised as family love. My marriage to Ryan had deepened into the kind of partnership I'd always imagined but never experienced. Built on mutual financial respect, shared professional goals, and appreciation for each other's achievements without expectations that success created obligations to subsidize family lifestyle choices. Miranda, I'm proud to be married to someone who had the courage to prosecute her own parents when they committed crimes against her, Ryan told me during our 2nd anniversary celebration. Your integrity and strength in protecting yourself from family financial manipulation shows me exactly the kind of character our children will learn from. Our financial partnership was healthy and productive, with combined resources that were protected by legal agreements and enhanced security protocols that made family financial manipulation impossible regardless of emotional pressure or guilt tactics. The business success that had grown from legal battles with family financial fraud was exceeding every expectation, with the digital marketing agency generating sufficient revenue to fund both our lifestyle and the non-profit foundation that helped other victims of family financial crimes. Mrs. Walsh, your experience prosecuting family members for financial fraud has made you the most trusted financial consultant in our industry, explained one corporate client during contract renewal discussions. Companies know that you'll protect their assets from internal threats because you've demonstrated the courage to prosecute anyone who tries to steal from clients. The professional reputation I'd gained from choosing legal protection over family loyalty was generating opportunities and referrals that had expanded the business into financial security consulting for corporations dealing with internal fraud and employee theft. But the most satisfying development was the complete psychological freedom I'd gained from family guilt and financial manipulation that had controlled my decisions for years. Without the constant drain of relatives treating my success as community property, I was accumulating wealth and building security at unprecedented rates while using resources to help other people protect themselves from family members who mistake love for unlimited access to financial accounts. The prenuptial agreement that had protected our marriage assets was being used as a template by other couples dealing with family members who viewed their relationship success as opportunities for financial exploitation and lifestyle subsidies. As my parents continued serving probation and making restitution payments, while Vanessa slowly rebuilt her life on foundations of actual employment rather than stolen money, I was enjoying the freedom that came from choosing legal boundaries over family accommodation. Have you ever had to prosecute family members for financial crimes to protect yourself from people who saw your success as their emergency fund? When you realized that their love was actually conditional on your willingness to accept systematic financial exploitation? Share your experiences with family financial fraud in the comments below, because your courage to choose legal protection might inspire someone else who's being manipulated by relatives who mistake achievement for obligation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family financial fraud and legal justice stories. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to prosecute relatives for financial crimes, and that sometimes the most loving response to family financial manipulation is criminal prosecution that protects both you and future victims from systematic exploitation. Thank you for joining me on this journey from family financial fraud to legal victory and authentic relationships, for supporting my decision to choose financial integrity over family approval, and for understanding that healthy families celebrate each other's success rather than exploiting it through systematic theft and identity fraud. Remember, you don't owe anyone access to your financial accounts just because you share DNA, and you're not obligated to accept systematic theft as the price of maintaining relationships with people who view your success as their funding source. You deserve family members who celebrate your achievements rather than exploiting them for their own lifestyle benefits. The sweetest justice isn't revenge or punishment. The sweetest justice is building a life so financially secure and legally protected that people who tried to steal from you can only make court-ordered restitution payments, while you thrive with partners and relatives who actually deserve your trust and financial success. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply prosecute criminal behavior regardless of family relationships, and build authentic connections with people who value your character more than your bank account balance.